What is up, guys, and welcome to another episode of The Meaning of Podcast. I am Ace.
This is RB3.
And this is the podcast where we get into the deeper meaning of your favorite filmmakers' movies. And this episode is a very special episode because we're finally going to do it, guys. We're going to count down our top 10 movies of 2017. We're a little bit late, not super late, not the latest, but we're kind of late.
We're beating the Oscar nomination.
Yeah, but we're still kind of late. So sorry about that, guys, but we are going to give you our top 10 films of the year. It's going to be pretty exciting. We're going to go 10 through 1. And I'm pumped to see what RB3 has because I don't know what is on his list. He doesn't know what's on my list. So we're going to have a good conversation about that. But before we get into that, guys, we want to read your comments. Be sure and leave us comments every week. We will be reading them. That is probably the best way to support us is to leave comments. So let's read comments from last week's episode, which was our top 5 directors of 2017, which is obviously quite different. Our first comment is from Baxio da Critica. Who says, as soon as, I don't know, I don't know how to pronounce your name. I'm making it up. It says, as soon as Ace explained the premise for how the choices were made, I thought, well, no Safdie brothers. It's funny how quickly I was proven wrong. The one thing that frustrated me about Good Time was how almost no one mentioned Benny Safdie's acting. I mean, that opening scene was heart-wrenching. So thanks for that, Ace. Yeah, he was a great actor in that. He's co-director, obviously,
right,
but he's a great actor in general.
It's like a small part, but it's still like impactful.
Absolutely, he's a great actor, and yeah, you chose the Safdie brothers. So
yeah. I mean, get a little indie flavor in there. I'm always all for that.
Our next comment is from Aaron Brooks. He says, I know you guys weren't looking at indie directors as much, but two of my favorites were the Yorgos Lanthimos with Killing of a Sacred Deer and Trey Edward Schultz with It Comes at Night. Definitely check out his first film, Krishna. I've seen neither of those movies. I think you've seen It Comes at Night.
It Comes at Night, yeah.
You didn't see Killing of a Sacred Deer, right?
No, I haven't. I really wanted to because Mr. I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but he also directed The Lobster, which I think the first half of that is a masterpiece. So I really want to check out.
I like how you say the first half to be very distinguished by that.
Yeah. Second half falls apart, but the first half is great.
Ibrahim Hamid, who I read a comment from last week, says, "Hi guys, who would you like to see trying a new genre out of your top 5 list? I would love to see Nolan doing a serial killer thriller film."
It's like David Fincher kind of like deal, but like from Nolan, that'd be great.
Yeah, Nolan, that'd be a very interesting one too.
Who's on your list that you want to see do something different though?
For my list?
Yeah, I mean, I know you had Jordan Peele, Greta Gerwig, Patty Jenkins, right? So you had a couple of people.
These are all such great choices. I feel like Patty Jenkins, I kind of want to see her do like a more grounded action movie, almost like an Atomic Blonde type movie.
Oh yeah.
Kind of like Charlize Theron. She did Monster with her, but do something like a female oriented action movie would be kind of cool without the superhero special effects, like a really grounded kind of small budget, almost like John Wick type movie.
Yeah,
I think that'd be kind of cool. I think she would kill that, in my opinion.
Right.
Helsing 7747 says, I like Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 more than the first one, too.
Hey,
there you go,
RB3.
Man.
We have some supporters of the Guardians Galaxy Volume 2 train, so
yeah, there you go.
That.
All right, guys, make sure you leave us more comments. We'll be reading them every week. We'll probably read next week's comments as well about our top 10 directors. And now we're just going to get into it, guys, because we have 10 directors each on our list. So
it's 10 films. 10 movies each.
10 movies. I'm sorry, guys. Yeah, 10 movies each on our films on our list.
Right.
And it's going to be a fun one, guys. I'm super curious to hear your thoughts, man. I'm genuinely curious. You obviously got dressed up for the occasion. I obviously didn't get dressed up for the occasion because I didn't feel like doing that. And because it's a hot January day.
Hot day in LA. It's just so weird because 3 days ago, it was pouring down and raining.
Yep.
It was
flooding.
Yeah.
Like, I legit, like, North Hollywood was like underwater.
Yeah.
And then the next day it's like hot again.
Yeah. I'm like, what happened?
Dude, it's crazy because last January, I remember it being so cold. This is around the time I ran my first half marathon. And it was cold. Like, it was really cold. And now it's like hot. It's like legitimately like 90 some degrees.
It really is. Like you see us sweating, like you probably see me sweating.
Yeah.
But
it's because it's hot.
It's hot.
And speaking of hot, our lists are hot too.
Hey, hot.
Let's start out with number 10 of your list, Mr. RB3. What is the number 10 movie of 2017 according to your opinion. And guys, we want to preface by saying this is our top 10 list, not the top 10 list. So if we miss a movie that you love, don't feel offended or upset. This is what we interpret our top 10 2017 films. Before, do you have any honorable mentions that you want to get to?
Yeah, I have a lot of honorable mentions. Of course, you got to shout out what our last commenter gave, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. I really wanted to put that on the list. It barely missed out. I caught... let me think. There's a lot. I mean, Call Me By Your Name is probably the biggest honorable mention for me because I really debated putting that on the list.
I didn't see
it. To me, it's the best directed movie of the year. To me,
really.
But just like the
movie itself didn't.
Didn't
click with you.
It's like the writing's very not flowery and like.
It's very European.
Yes, European. In the sense
that's the best way to say it.
It's like everything's a metaphor. I'm like, like speak normally, you know what I mean? Like, but besides that, I mean, in terms of directing, it's probably the best directed movie of the year. So I wanted to put it on the list, but I couldn't. Call Me By Your Name is definitely there. Guardians, Atomic Blonde was close. There's a lot of great movies in 2017. Like, you could almost make it top 15, top 20, and there'd be all quality films. Collateral was another one. But yeah, those are my big honorable mentions.
Mine, real quick, just so I can get them out of the way.
Right.
Darkest Hour was super close to making my list. I love that movie. I think it's a great movie. I think it's more than just a performance movie for Gary Oldman. Another one that just missed my list was Colossal. I thought Colossal was good with Anne Hathaway. And that's kind of it. As far as like my honorable mentions.
I want to say one more, and nobody's putting it on their top 10 list because I guess, a lot of people only want one animated film on their list. But I think Loving Vincent doesn't get enough credit for like the extraordinary animation that's taking place in that movie. Even though the story is fine, it's kind of a generic story, but
the animation is incredible.
Yeah, it's the first painted movie of all time. So
yeah,
amazing to me.
Absolutely.
I loved it.
Cool. Now for your number 10, Mr. RB3.
My number 10. All right. So, and I also got to say, I didn't see Three Billboards. That's my only thing. And I would have loved to seen it, but that was it. And I didn't get to see Molly's Game. Those could have been on the list, but I just didn't see them. So I apologize about that. But my number 10, I always, we did an episode on the gentleman who directed this really recently, Mr. Steven Spielberg, coming back with The Post.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, this is one I saw a couple days ago. And this is a film that it could have been really generic and really, just paint by numbers. And I thought the critics were kind of loving it because it's relevant. It's more relevant than it is probably the subject material has ever been before. But from Spielberg's directing standpoint, you could tell he was very passionate about the material, and you got like the sense that it was like young Spielberg back behind the camera. And to me, it's probably his best like drama film since Catch Me If You Can, in terms of when you separate him from historical drama and the sci-fi stuff. To me, it's probably his best since Catch Me If You Can in terms of like the way it moves through, the way that, it's just filled with energy and suspense, and it's like a clicking time bomb, the way it's established. And really, it's journalism, so how exciting can that be? But he makes it exciting, and that's what puts that at my number 10.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, you know what's funny? I haven't seen The Post.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's one of those things that you guys are going to find out real quick for everyone who's listening that I didn't see a lot of movies this year. I missed a lot of movies that I wanted to see really bad.
Right.
And that I was like, you know what? I'm going to have to just take it on the chin. I'm going to miss a bunch of movies.
Yeah.
But I had to prioritize based on like my family vacation and all that.
Right,
so,
right.
Going back home really... Like, it was hard. Like, it was tough for me to catch up on all the films because all the films coming out literally came out from, like, December 25th to, like, January 4th. Which was all that time I had with my family.
And we don't get award screeners.
And we don't get screeners. And I was just like, I'm just going to pick and choose which ones I want to see. But I genuinely do want to see The Post, like, really bad. I kind of have this hesitation towards, like, another Meryl Streep show. I mean, she's great.
Yeah.
I love Meryl Streep, but it's one of those things where it's like, all right, Meryl Streep again. Here we go. Tom Hanks again. Let's do this.
Yeah.
But I heard that supporting cast is really good too. I know Sarah Paulson's in this movie for like a
she's
short amount of time.
Minutes, yeah.
But I just love Sarah. Anytime I get to mention Sarah Paulson, I will mention Sarah Paulson. So literally, she's in this movie for 5 minutes, I think. But I still mention Sarah Paulson.
No. And another familiar face of the year, Michael Schuberg, is in this.
Oh yeah.
Also in Call Me By Your Name.
That's
which is,
right.
But he's great in it. Jesse Plemons, Bob Odenkirk. All of like they got like
It's a great cast.
It's literally one of the best casts.
That's
I think.
awesome.
Yeah, so for me, and again, it was a movie I was like excited for. I also thought critics were having a bias towards it because of the whole journalism angle and how that's under attack and how the press is, especially with the president that we have now. But even the stuff with Disney recently, where Disney and the LA Times had that big feud. And,
That's right.
So I thought in that respect, critics were giving it a little more credit because it's
But you felt like it was given the right amount of credit.
Yeah, I feel as though that because, like I said, it felt like a young Spielberg. Like the camera was, my problem with Lincoln was, the camera was just kind of still the whole time. It wasn't like the immaculate shots. But in this movie, you do kind of get like some really impressive like work from the camera and the way it moves, the one takes. Like it was awesome to me. So
great.
Yeah, I was happy to see that.
My number 10 is a movie that I saw a little bit earlier this year. Well, actually not too early this year, but it barely made my list because, like I said before, Darkest Hour. It was between this one and Darkest Hour, but just I chose a movie that I felt would stick with me the most and the one that kind of like related to me the most, and I went with It. It is my number 10 movie of the year. I talked about Andy Muschietti last week about his directing and about what he accomplished with this movie is just absolutely like phenomenal and unheard of, making the biggest horror movie of all time, probably the biggest R-rated movie of all time, like those types of rare movies that can relate to an audience that is younger and an audience that is older, an audience that enjoys horror, an audience that doesn't care about horror as much as like me, right? I like horror, but I'm not the biggest horror fan because I know a lot of people who are massive horror fans, and that's just not me.
Right.
And yet I found this movie to be absolutely relatable. It's about facing your fears in a very dark, intimate kind of way with a group of friends and how those bonds and friendships can last through traumatic experiences. And it's one of those movies that it stuck with me mainly because of Pennywise and because of Skarsgård and his performance that he gave in that movie. It's just... I found it fascinating. I found it fun. I found it funny. I thought the voice was great. I thought the bits were great. I thought the scares were great. I just felt like overall the movie hit so many things for me, and I walked out just loving it. I love that movie, and that's why it's my number 10, and it's just one of those movies that I just can't talk enough about. It's absolutely great.
I always say like the tell of a classic piece of like art in today's age. And it's not a joke. I think this is serious. I think it comes to memes. Like when there's a lot of memes focused around something, it's a quality piece of entertainment. And I think it just like that, the whole like Pennywise under the...
It's just classic, dude. Like, there's so many jokes that come out of that, too.
Yeah, and before, 90s obviously didn't have memes, but like that the older it doesn't have the same kind of resonance that this one has. And I think that, that plays a big part into it.
Absolutely. I talked about it last week, but it hit so many people, right? There's so many Latino people that love this movie. There's so many people that just really got a kick of there was like a meme of like, what does Pennywise have to say to get you down there with him? Remember that? I don't know if you remember that meme. But it was like one of my favorite memes ever because it was like, everyone was like, I got endless cereal. I got NBA 2K down here.
Obama's president again.
Yeah, it's like, come down here. And my favorite was like this guy. I retweeted it and he got like so many retweets because he was just like, hey, bro, come down here with me. It's cool. And it's just like, that's all he has to say because Pennywise is just so cool because that's kind of the vibe that people got from Pennywise. There's so many things in this movie, whether it be the dancing moment where the stage pops out and he's just dancing, or whether it be I love the moment when they all go to the house the first time and he's just like, realizing that
they're overcoming
and he starts to get afraid of that and you start to see his voice crack and he's like, this isn't real enough for you, Billy. Like all his lines are great. The time to float is great. Like everything just works so well for me in this movie that I loved it. I just freaking loved it.
The kid from Stranger Things too, Finn Wolfhard.
Yeah.
Amazing in this movie.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Like he's kind of the reason why I went back to watch Stranger Things season 2, which I ended up loving. But he was so funny in this, and having a kid do that kind of humor.
And I really felt like the character of Beverly really hit as well, especially being the only female in that group.
Yeah.
And what her issues what her issues and what her fears were in this movie was just spectacular. The way they handled it was really, really well done.
Yeah. Do you think Jessica Chastain is going to play?
I mean, that's what everyone's saying.
Yeah.
I like that casting. Some people are saying Amy Adams too. I just think they're saying them because they're the most famous redheads that we know.
Right. Well, also,
but they're great.
Jessica Chastain was in Muschietti's last movie.
That's
too,
right.
Mama, so
that's right.
Relationship.
There you go. Yeah, that's my number 10.
Your number 10. All right, my number 9. Little known film came out on Netflix earlier this year by one of my favorite directors, Noah Baumbach. I'm going to go with the Meyerowitz Stories, New and Selected.
Oh, okay.
Nice little indie film. Got Ben Stiller, Adam Sandler.
Noah Baumbach, husband to Greta Gerwig.
Husband to Greta Gerwig.
Fiance to Greta Gerwig.
I think they're married. I don't know.
Either way, he's still Greta Gerwig for me.
Right. And Greta Gerwig's actually in this too. She has a small part. Yeah. And we're gonna talk about more, I'm assuming, later in the list for both of us. But that movie is so funny. Dustin Hoffman's in it. Emma Thompson. There's so many great actors, and I just feel like, a lot of people say it's the most Noah Baumbach-y movie that he's ever made in terms of and I could see it it's the same plot of The School in the Well, but just with older people. But that being said, I'm not going to persecute him for that. I think that's great. I think that's funny. I think that's like a more mature version of that. And I think just on a writing level, there's probably, I don't know why people aren't talking about this movie for like screenplay considerations. Because to me, this is probably not one of the top 2 or top 3 original screenplays I've seen this year. Or I've watched this year, I guess. I haven't actually read the screenplay, but it's just everything sharp. Each character has their own individual arc. And, also a lot of people criticize is like the last 15 minutes fall apart. I don't disagree with that as well. Like the ending does kind of fall flat, but everything leading up to those moments are just so spectacular. It was absolutely one of the most underseen movies of the year. This is where I'm coming, from your perspective too, almost, I kind of wish Netflix would put a little more behind this. And I want to put Mudbound on this list too. I didn't mention that in honorable mentions, but that would have also, Netflix is just so good, and I have another Netflix movie on here too later on in the list. I shouldn't be spoiling this much of my list, but so Netflix has had 3 genuinely great movies in my opinion this year. Meyerowitz Story just kind of went undersold for me, but I love this movie so much. So.
It's one of the, again, guess what? I haven't seen the movie.
Yeah.
To be completely honest, you know what's funny? If I'm being real honest, I was legitimately, because when you're on Netflix and you're searching and you're bored on a Saturday night, it's late at night, and I'm like, I'm gonna watch a movie. Oh, I heard this one's good, and I clicked on that one, and then I was like, nah, bro, I'm just gonna watch Supernatural or something.
Yeah.
I wasn't in the mood to see the trailers just didn't set it's very I don't know, it just didn't capture me as much as but I've heard nothing but great things about it.
Yeah.
Everyone has been recommending it left and right. But like you said, man, there you go, the Netflix model.
Yeah.
They put out great stuff. They let directors make their movies, and then they just disappear. It gets buried under countless of other content, and it just doesn't get any attention. And this is one of those examples where it's you heard about it, but that's kind of it.
I feel like, and I wish critics would have recognized it a little more too.
Sure.
Again, a lot of people have a lot of criticisms towards this, but for me, coming into this movie, knowing what the subject material was gonna, I didn't watch any trailers or anything, but you just know, especially after watching a lot of Noah Baumbach movies like Squid in the Well, of course, and he has so many others. Margaret at the Wedding, a lot of films while we're young, just recently, and but you come in and it has that Noah Baumbach feel, but it feels so much more mature. I don't know, man. I'm probably giving it a lot of credit just because I like seeing Adam Sandler act again. He's been AWOL for such a long time,
and there was a point where he was making so many bad movies in a row. After another, and you're like, man, dude, he sold his soul to the devil, dude. Adam Sandler is just straight up. Yeah, but you're right. This is one of those rare occasions where you're like, well, there he is.
He showed up. He was there to play, and same thing with Ben Stiller. He was great in this. Dustin Hoffman doesn't really do well these days, but he was good. So I'm happy with this movie.
Awesome. My number 9 is a movie that a lot of people have higher on their list, and I completely understand why it's much higher for other people. I came out of this movie completely, I was sold. I was like, that was a great movie, but other people came out of this movie saying it was one of the greatest of all time and one of the greatest genre films of all time. And I felt like there was a lot of greatness in it, but I felt like it's not as high as other genre films on my list, and that's Logan. Logan is my number 9 on this list, and Logan is a movie that obviously is just it gives one of the greatest, rawest performances from their lead actors, which is Patrick Stewart and Hugh Jackman. And I've raved on this podcast about Hugh Jackman, whether it be The Fountain, whether it be any other movie that he's done, Prisoners, every podcast that we've had, and we've had mentions of Hugh Jackman, I've talked so much greatness about this guy because I really do feel like he's one of the greats, not just like, oh, he's Wolverine. No. This guy is a goat. Like he's so good, and he shows it in this movie. He shows so many different varies of emotions, and the character of Wolverine and the X-Men franchise that we've had for the past 17 years is all the weight of it is felt in this movie. And I feel like that's kind of why it's hitting so many people so hard, because it really is like watching this movie, you feel it more because you remember Professor X and you remember Wolverine and you remember them when they were in their prime, and watching this movie and seeing them fall down and seeing them kind of struggle and seeing them kind of like barely survive life because you're at the brink of death is just heartbreaking. It destroys your soul. It's just one of those movies that really brings you to your knees emotionally because of what Hugh Jackman, Patrick Stewart delivers. However, something that I feel like not enough people have been talking about is Boyd Holbrook. I think Boyd Holbrook in this movie is like one of my favorite things in this movie, and he's not in it super long, but what he delivers, he gives a performance that says so much with so little, in my opinion, where you see exactly what is happening in this dystopian future, and you see exactly what is happening in this world through his character. And I feel like that's what a lot of people aren't talking about, because guess what? I said this on Twitter not a while back, but like 2 months back, rewatching this movie because it's on HBO now. This movie's all about borders. This movie's all about racism. This movie's all about immigration, prejudice. And it hits really close to home for me based on that itself, because again, this movie takes place where I used to live. It takes place in El Paso, Texas, and then across the border to Juarez, Mexico. And a lot of people are ignoring that because when this movie opens, it shows the border and it shows the issues with the border and it shows people flipping off people at the border and stuff. And it's a world where now that the mutants are gone, we're kind of back to this, hyper racist society, hyper prejudiced society where everyone hated mutants so much, and their racism and their prejudice went to the point of literally exterminating every single one of them. And it's a world where Wolverine's like the only freaking mutant left because of his mutant power to survive, right?
Right.
And it's one of those things where it's like, this is where our society has gotten as far as our racism and our prejudice. And I feel like that's what the movie is about. And everyone's like, well, that scene where Wolverine just like stabs the guy in the face. And I'm like, that's not what the movie's about, man. It's really about like the brink of all the racism and all the prejudice felt against the mutants have gotten to a point where, guess what? We killed them all. Right. Like that's how dark it's gotten, where prejudice won. And I feel like that's so powerful, and Boyd Holbrook embodies that entirely. Because again, from Arizona, I've seen people like Boyd Holbrook in real life. I think I told you that before, where it's like, I know that guy. He doesn't have to say one racist word, and he's freaking racist as hell. And it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, this is your job, but you get a kick out of like killing mutants, don't you? Like you get a kick out of it. And it's one of those, I don't know. I feel like this movie really hit some incredible notes, and not enough people are talking about that level specifically.
I think Boyd Holbrook is probably one of the top like 1 or 2 X-Men villains of all time in the movies.
100%.
Yeah, I can't really think of another villain that's as memorable.
Maybe Stryker, but other than even this one is more powerful than Stryker in my opinion.
Right. Because it's a real manifestation of something real and humanity. I mean it's on my list too. So there you go. A little higher. We might talk. I'll talk more about why I made my list a little bit later.
What's your?
But going up to my number 8.
Yeah.
Of course, I got to go with. This will be higher, probably on your list and probably on a lot of people's list. And I understand that. I just, for me, I enjoyed this movie a lot, and I'm going to go with Guillermo del Toro's The Shape of Water.
Okay.
At my number 8 spot. This is a film that I enjoyed a lot. I thought, the idea of making the creature from the Black Lagoon, but like a romance story is really interesting. I love the fact that Guillermo takes the traditional standards of like male patriarchy and kind of flips down his head with like the Michael Shannon character. I like the representation of the silenced woman and the Sally Hawks, Sally Hawks, and Richard Jenkins is incredible. So all around, this movie is just excellent filmmaking from start to finish, and it being a sci-fi genre film that's still accessible to a lot of people and that still like exudes brilliant filmmaking. Probably one of the best shot movies of the year as well. The cinematography
100%
is unreal in this, and it's beautiful. My only thing, it would have probably hit like a top 5 spot. I just have one complaint with this movie though, and I've told you this, like when we saw it together, and as soon as I walked out, I was like, man, I love it. But they had to pander to the Hollywood people. In order to win Oscars, you have to make it a Hollywood story. You have to movies like that. To me was a little cheesy, and it felt like shoehorned in.
You didn't feel like there was. I kind of debated with you on that. You didn't feel like that was El Toro being a genuinely big.
No, I think it is. He's
a Hollywood fan.
I think I absolutely think he is, and I think he's showing that through the work, through Creatures of, like I said, it's Creature of the Black Lagoon in terms of like design and everything. Yeah. And I appreciate that. My only thing is just like,
you don't want a dance number in
I don't want a dance number in the
your
middle.
fish love story.
Yeah, exactly.
Yo, this is my fish love story. I ain't want no dance number in this.
That's me, you know what I mean? So that was my only problem with it. And I think that's, hey, listen, Guillermo got to do what he got to do, right? He's winning Oscars for it.
He's like, yo, La La Land kicked ass last year.
Yeah, let me do that. Like, the artist won Best Picture, let me do that, I'm
with you. I feel like this movie, walking out of it, I was hype on it, and then through time, I felt like the best parts of this movie, if I'm being truly honest, was the performances. Michael Shannon is amazing in this movie.
Right.
Sally Hawkins is great in this movie, but the one that killed it for me was Richard Jenkins in this movie, who plays Sally Hawkins' friend in the movie.
Right.
He is so good. He's probably my favorite part in this movie. Like my favorite performance in this movie. It's crazy saying that because his performance is much smaller than Sally Hawkins.
Right.
But Michael Shannon, man, that guy's is spectacular. He's so freaking good, and I feel like that overall overshadowed the whole. Like, if I'm being real honest, it didn't 100% click with me, the fish love story.
Okay.
Like, I was almost there. I was like, maybe I buy it, but it still felt like halfway through the movie, I still felt like it still feels a little too like you found like a stray dog and you're like, man, that dog's cute, and that's kind of like,
and you start having sex with that
that's
dog.
what I'm saying. That's kind of what I'm saying though. Like at that point, I was like, yo, it's a cute dog, but damn, come on.
Oh, man.
That's kind of what I felt about it. Like, I felt like it was a little too much where it's like, look at this poor stray dog who's been abused. And it's like, whoa, but let's not go there. Let's not mate with the dog.
Right.
So I wasn't like 100% sold on that. And just my opinion, I know I'm on the minority on that. But
no, I mean, I dug it for the sense. I mean, they established why
I get it. I get why. I still felt like it was more like a creature that you feel bad, and it's like I said, like a stray dog, and you're like, oh, poor dog, I want to help it, I'm gonna give it a home, I'm gonna give it some food,
right,
kind of thing.
I do appreciate the fact that they go into a little bit of like the idea of like animal cruelty with how they were treating the creature, and also just the fact that, like, I mean, I don't know if it's a spoiler or not, but the creature, I mean, it's a supernatural thing, and they're like abusing it and zapping it or whatever. Like, yo, and then like they even say in the movie, it's like you're almost tampering with God, like at this point, you know what I mean? Like, so I thought them approaching that idea was so fascinating, and the way they incorporated like how the fish, I don't know if it's a he or she, I shouldn't, but the way it's
probably a dude.
Yeah. I mean, we don't know.
It's Doug Jones.
Doug. By the way, Doug Jones they need to make an Oscar for just like motion, like costume, like, I don't know, like, I don't know what you would, because he's the GOAT at that.
I guess you would say a stunt performer.
I guess stunts, yeah, but I mean, it's not really. He's really acting though. I mean, true. That's. I mean, the body language matters when you're doing a part like that, and he's fantastic. Like I said, he's like a live action version of Andy Serkis, But yeah, and Michael Schoenberg again, another one.
That's right.
Another one. Another one.
I still love that scene though, where Michael Shannon, again, just not really spoilers, but where he kind of discovers the. I just like that. I like the aspect of the Russia and the U.S. angle during this time period.
Right.
I thought that was handled really well in this movie, and that embodies Michael Shannon's character like perfectly.
Yeah, absolutely.
My number 8 is a movie that you probably, I don't know if you're gonna have it on your list, and it's a movie that a lot of people have been praising. A little, I don't want to say a little too much praise, but I do feel like a lot of people are. No, I think it's the right amount of praise. I just felt like people are overlooking the production problems of this movie, and I get it on a director standpoint, but I still feel like Tom is right about this movie, and it was just way too much money.
Right.
And that's Blade Runner 2049. Blade Runner 2049 is probably the most visually spectacular movie I've seen in years. It's absolutely visually stunning. It's got some of the best CG work I've seen. It's got some of the best combination between production design, like practical effects, practical sets, practical objects, and CG combined. It's one of those movies that's just absolutely visually striking. The score is top notch. The directing is top notch. The acting is great, and it works on so many levels. And the story just really works for me. I feel like it really does work. And it's one of those movies that follow-ups one of my favorite directors of all time, which is Ridley Scott, and his masterpiece known as Blade Runner. And it follows it up in a fantastic way. It's one of those sequels to me that feels like it fits right in. It works perfectly with the first one, and it really does hit you on both the emotional level and just a visually inspiring level, and that's why it's on my list at number 8.
Right.
And I know you had a lot to say about this movie.
Well, listen. I mean,
you've said enough, RB3. Enough.
Hey, listen, it's not going to be on my list, obviously. I respect it as a movie on its own. You're right. The direction's great. It's visually stunning.
The score is great. The visuals
I don't
are
agree
great.
with the
You don't
score,
think
though.
the score is amazing?
I've listened to the score maybe like 8 or 9 times, like the whole album over and over again. It just can't. I don't know.
On.
It's not like the way. See, that's my thing. Like, I keep comparing it to the original Blade Runner.
I'm saying don't.
It's like, dude, it's like how people are mad at The Last Jedi because it's like, I grew up on Star Wars. I watched it since '77. Now, I didn't watch Blade Runner when it came out in '82, of course, but to me, that's been ingrained in my psyche, into my film. And I even said, like, I think on the Schmo show, like, one of my first shows, they're like, what's one of your favorite movies? I was like, Blade Runner. So to me, it's like, it's meant so much more than what the themes they're trying to get across are, or what they represent, which is fine. But I just, it is what it is. I keep, again, as a movie itself, it probably is like an A+ film. It's probably a 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10, whatever. But as a movie that I wanted to see from a Blade Runner sequel, it wasn't that personally. And, there's been kind of proof that, not like proof, but my thing is like, it felt like they kicked Ridley Scott off the set, basically. Like, they're filming their thing, and they're like Ridley Scott's like, hey, maybe you should try. And they're like, no, fuck it. And then like the stories come out, like, yeah, they did kick Ridley Scott off of set. So I'm like, all right, cool. And the respect as like the philosophically, Ridley Scott has some ideas of what he wanted to do with a sequel to Blade Runner, and he worked with the original writer of the original with this one, but it's also like Denis Villeneuve wanted to do his own thing, which is fine. I respect that. But again, it's like The Last Jedi for me. You know what I mean? So to me,
I don't know if I know what you mean. I know what you mean.
Yeah.
I'm just tripping. I just felt like he really did deliver. He created something that was its own thing, but it still fit into the Blade Runner universe, and he still made it a true work of art.
Right.
Like, it's a true work of art, not one of those things where you feel like it's attempting to be a work of art, but it's actually like, damn, this is just really good.
Yeah.
It's just really. Also, I mean, obviously I didn't mention it, but Roger Deakins is 1000% deserves the Oscar like 10 times over for this movie, because this movie is one of the most incredibly shot movies I have ever seen.
Yeah,
it's just
beautiful.
so good. It looks so freaking good. And the colors and the design and the sets and everything just fits perfectly into this movie.
Yeah.
I do feel like it suffered a little bit from the promotional aspect, and it suffered a little bit with the incredible large budget that it had, because it had a huge budget. But overall, it's just a great movie.
Yeah, not a great movie for me.
Moving on, RB3.
Right,
Moving on.
Right. Now we're going to my number 7, right?
Yeah.
This is a film that, of course, the year in animation hasn't necessarily floated us up to the top in terms of, we've seen like previous years, like what was it, 2010, where we had Despicable Me come out, Tangled come out, and then Toy Story 3 come out.
Yep.
And this movie is from the same director as Toy Story 3, Lee Unkrich, another Pixar production, and that is Coco. This is absolutely one of my favorite movies of the year. I really wanted to put it higher, but then I was like,
You have other movies?
yeah, I have other movies,
Yeah.
but this was, I mean, when I walked out of it, I was like, this has to be like number one, like, or number 2 or something. But just kind of thinking about it, but probably one of the, and I'll say this up too, like the end of the movie is probably the most emotional I've ever gotten in like any movie ever. You know what I mean? Because there's so many different emotional beats in this movie that hit so hard that once there's a couple of things happen at the end that where you're just like, it just kills you, it just destroys you. So for me, this is without a doubt, and it's probably one of the best Pixar movies ever made. The fact that you get a representation of Mexican culture with the Day of the Dead, like all of that stuff, and me being from Compton, it's a large Mexican community, so I'm very familiar with like those traditions and stuff like that. A lot of people celebrate that in my community. So for me watching this and seeing that represented on screen is really breathtaking, and from a visual standpoint, from an animation standpoint, it is mind blowing how they're able to create some of these lavish like set designs and like these great like set pieces of representing the Day of the Dead. And a lot of people of course are comparing it to the Book of Life, but I think it's very different in the respect that is more about the celebration of the culture than is I think Book of Dead was more about the music aspect of it, whereas this movie was more about the celebration of life within the Mexican community. So I really dug it, man. This is one of the best Pixar movies ever, and then this is my number 7.
Yeah, speaking on that animation is just out of this world.
Oh, yeah.
It's crazy. And there's this little video I saw about it that showed how many layers upon layers upon layers of like rendering and animation and just like processing that this movie took. And Pixar always goes hard.
Oh yeah.
Always, but I feel like they went like extra hard in this movie as well, just making sure that it like looked beautiful, first of all.
There were some shots in this movie where I was like, is this shot live action? Like I just couldn't believe like it was looking as incredible as it was looking. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's on your. I'm assuming it's on your list, so
You're gonna see it.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about it more later.
It's definitely on my list. Let's move on to my number. Are we on 7?
Yeah, 7. Yeah.
My number 7 is a movie I saw in the summer. That's a great movie and that I absolutely loved. And it's called Wind River. It's directed by Taylor Sheridan. I mentioned it on the Schmoes Know Show before as part of my indie picks. Not enough people are talking about this movie, man. Yeah. This movie is so good. It's one of those rare movies that is like perfectly well paced in the sense of like it's so much mystery and build up and suspense and tension and trying to figure out. It's basically a murder mystery, right? So you're trying to figure out, who murdered this girl, and that's like the opening shot of the movie, and it builds so much tension and so much suspense, and it builds up this unimaginable thing you have in your mind as far as who the villain is and who this monster can be to murder a girl this violently and dump her body out, kind of thing, and make her run in the snow, because that's how the movie opens. Right. And finally, when you get to that resolve in the third act, it's one of the best deliveries I've seen in a movie in a while, where it just delivers on all front as far as like how much all that tension that was built up just releases in the greatest like quick 20 minutes that you've had. And it's so well done, and it's so well represented, and it's just an incredible movie on every single front, and it just absolutely hit me in the right direction. And I remember walking out of this movie, I was like, well, it's one of my favorites of the year, and it still is, obviously, till this day, because it really is one of those rare movies that can combine great writing with great directing, and it's a first-time director with Taylor Sheridan, and it just absolutely nailed it on every single aspect for me, specifically on the emotional aspect and how you felt about what was happening in this movie. And then the movie obviously ends, and it's one of those movies that it's good to talk about the Native American reservations and the Indian reservations, and Taylor Sheridan wanted to bring that a part of his trilogy, because he has a trilogy going on with Sicario, Hell or High Water, and this one, where it's all about a certain aspect of Americana and tensions between American different cultures in America, stuff like that, which this movie just delivered on every aspect for me, and I highly recommend it. Obviously Jeremy Renner gave an amazing performance.
Elizabeth Olsen,
there you go, Hawkeye and a Scarlet Witch. It really is, yeah.
You know what's so funny? This movie is so good, you don't even like make that connection anytime within. Like you just think, oh, these are just two actors. But no, I saw it pretty recently. Unfortunately, it didn't make my list either. I should have mentioned. There's so many movies. I didn't even think to put in the honorable mentions. But like this movie's so good, and like you're right, it highlights the tensions and the underboiling, problems that are subsiding in between Native Americans, kind of boiled up through history, right? I mean, that's a lot of what this movie's about, the past and how the past has come back to haunt a lot of these people. And same with that's the whole premise of the murder mystery too, right? How, the decisions that this girl's made, who was seemingly doing, all she could to survive in that, like, in the situation that she finds herself in. And I don't want to spoil it, but like, it's a great, it's a great film, but it's also a great, like, metaphor for everything that's happening, like, in our current society and what's happening in a past society as well. I think that I don't know who's the Native American guy who's in like every movie. But,
oh my goodness, I forget his name. John Roca.
Yeah. He's in this too, but he has a great scene with Renner at the end that's just like so heartbreaking. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And Renner, by the way, he never gets enough credit as an actor to me. He's mind blowing.
He's so good. Yeah. He's so good. He's absolutely underrated. And obviously this movie is just, again, that third act for me, you know what I'm talking about.
Right.
So good. And it's so realistic. It feels like that's, if anything like that ever went down, that's how it would go down.
Yeah.
And it's crazy how you see different types of movies that do action scenes certain ways in a very dramatic, crazy, like slow-mo, and everyone's dodging bullets and stuff, and this one just shows you like, nah bro, it'd be crazy, like if in a real life shootout
it would literally take 2 minutes.
It would take 2 minutes, and it's very painful. And you're saying a lot of bad words in the middle of it. You're just like, oh shit, and you're like trying to like, that's real, like that felt so real to me. And it's so good, man. I just can't talk enough about it, and I love the character of Jeremy Renner, obviously, and it's a great freaking movie, and I feel more people should be talking about this movie, and hopefully they will now, since they're watching this podcast.
Hey, that's the way we go about it.
Hey man, because we have so many listeners right now tuning in. Go watch Wind River. I highly recommend it. It's on video on demand, so you can just rent it or stream it anywhere you have renting or streaming. So
absolutely.
There you go. Let's jump over to your number 6.
My number 6, of course, Logan. You know what I mean? Logan is not probably the best superhero movie of the year, to me at least, and probably one of the greatest of all time. I mean, we saw in the Collider Top 50 video and made like number 2. So
number 2. That was in that video. Hey, you know what's funny about that video, real quick? Like, I just ranted about Boyd Holbrook, kind of like I did right now. I just was like, Boyd Holbrook, this and this and this and blah, blah, all of it, and just none of it made it. Really? They're like, we just wanted to talk about Patrick Stewart and Hugh Jackman. But we didn't say that, but I'm just saying I think it's funny. But absolutely, it's a great movie. I agree with that. I agree with it.
I think, a lot of people have started to coin this term neo-Western in terms of like how it's taking the traditions of Western films and making it into the new era, kind of subversing those those tropes, and in many ways, I mean, it kind of fits into that category. Except though, I will argue this: I think it very much feels like a Western in its direction from James Mangold, using, those wide landscape shots and whatnot. But I'd almost want to consider it the first in what I hope that soon form in the genre of neo superheroes or something like that. You know what I mean? Because we've had the superhero genre long enough now where we've come to an understanding of the iconography and the ideas and themes that we could come to recognize in a superhero movie. But this movie kind of takes a lot of that and subverts it, turns it on its head, but still ultimately comes to a resonating conclusion that makes it feel like an X-Men film, that makes it feel like a story about Logan and Wolverine and the plight of mutants. And I respect it greatly on that front. I mean, you're right. It deals with a lot of things of immigration, of racism, of all that. But I think I notice a lot of times when talking about this movie is how it tackles mental illness, particularly with like dementia and Alzheimer's and all that stuff that Patrick Stewart's Professor X is dealing with throughout this movie. And if you ask me, Patrick Stewart should be in the conversation for Best Supporting Actor of the Year. I don't know why his name hasn't come up in a lot of these formats, but he delivered probably the best superhero comic book adaptation performances since Heath Ledger's and The Dark Knight. I honestly do feel that way, and he was going hard at it, and I really wish that, I mean, of course, Hollywood and Oscars are not really going to look at superhero films, genre films, unless it's something like Get Out or something that's like more transcending of I guess,
specifically superhero films.
I feel.
Genre films maybe, but superhero films,
yeah, they either have to be
rare, dude.
They have to be Shape of Water and cut to a black and white musical sequence, or they have to be Get Out, where at a certain point, we're gonna talk about Get Out later, but at a certain point, a movie could be so good that you just can't ignore it, I feel like Logan was so good to the point you can't ignore it, but, a lot of people are still ignoring it. But you're right.
I do feel like it's that superhero thing.
Yeah.
Where it's like Get Out, it's like, it's a horror. Shape of Water, it's like sci-fi-ish. This one, superhero, they're so like anti-superhero.
Yeah.
Like the Oscars are,
right,
at least.
Right.
I'm kind of with you on that.
Yeah. And I think, I don't know, man, this movie is far and away the best X-Men movie they've ever made, and which is really cool because we had such a great year with X-Men content, whether you look at Logan for the movies or TV with Legion, which is also my favorite television program of last year. And I'm really happy to see that they're trying some new things. Now, maybe with this whole Disney Fox merger, maybe these nice things come to an end, but I'm looking forward to see where it all lands out, and I hope they keep experimenting with the genre a little bit.
Yeah, let's not get into that. You're so optimistic I'm so pessimistic about that. I won't even get into it. I think it's a terrible decision. I think it's the end of Logan and all that, but that's just me. What are your thoughts of, because a lot of people have been mentioning it too, and she's great, Daphne Keane on this movie.
Oh, she's amazing. Yeah, and that's another thing, putting a young female talent in a movie like this,
a young female Latina talent.
Yeah, person of color, yeah, and she just kills it.
Everyone is not talking about that, and that, again, I mean, obviously, I take a personal taking to that, but I feel like it's like everyone's like, yeah, it's cool because she claws people, and I'm like, yeah, but she's also only speaks Spanish, bro.
Yeah,
like no one's talking about that. But anyways,
right.
She's great in this movie.
Yeah, she's absolutely mind blowing in this. My only thing with this film, and again, it's a minor complaint, but when Daphne King's mom brings, or person who plays her mom in this movie, brings like the video, it's like this perfectly edited like documentary. I'm like, damn, you could submit this to Sundance, or did you make this on your phone?
She's a filmmaker on the side, man. She's a nurse who does filmmaking.
Yeah, that was my only. It's a very minor complaint, but I was like, that's a little. Come on, y'all. But besides that, and also I love the idea that they made the X-Men comics and incorporated that in a way that was like, oh, these are just legends that we dealt with, like, and these are people's interpretation of the real life events that might have happened. I think that was really again, that's the idea of like neo-noir, where it takes noir trends and flips it on its head. Neo-Western, with movies like Unforgiven and Bone Tomahawk and all these, great new Westerns that we've seen. And, a lot of people categorize Logan as that. But I feel like Logan's the first one to be like, no, this is a comic book movie that's like actively going against comic book form. And I think it's absolutely one of the best movies of the year.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's great. I mean, I mentioned my bit about it, about, the conversation about crossing the border and all that. That's literally the entire premise of the movie that I feel like some people might be ignoring.
By the way, I'm sorry to cut you off, but the one thing I forgot to mention was that scene where Logan is staying where Logan and Patrick Stewart and Professor X are staying with the family, and they're just like having dinner and like all that stuff. It was so sweet. As soon as they got killed off, man, I was like, oh, that's like
wasn't that too hard? I was like, yo, that's too hard, man.
Yeah, that's like damn, they really went there. Like
they really did.
Yeah, that was like a gut punch right there, man. I was like, and then they follow that immediately with Professor X getting killed. It's like
it's too much.
Yeah,
man.
yeah.
It's
Sorry
like,
for spoilers if you haven't seen Logan.
Come on, everyone's seen Logan.
Everyone's seen Logan, but yeah, no, that to me, I was like, oh, dude, this is.
Are you kidding? That I was almost like, I was getting really emotional in this movie, man.
Yeah,
this movie got me emotional. I really did. It really was Patrick Stewart. It really was that whole concept between father and son and all that they talk about in this movie, kind of with like Logan being his son. He's kind of his son, and at the same time, he's kind of his father figure in the sense of like taking care of him now. Right. It really is an emotional arc that's been going on since the first X-Men. And rewatching that first X-Men after rewatching this film, it's crazy how you see like everything is between Professor X and Logan, and having that connection that they initially had in the beginning of that first movie. It's crazy, and it all comes full circle with Logan.
Right.
Absolutely, man. Yeah. My number 6 is a movie you already mentioned. And this movie would have been a lot higher for me. But again, there's just some other movies that just barely topped it for me. And that is Coco. Coco is my number 6 movie of 2017. And this movie, you mentioned your emotional aspect of it. My emotional aspect of it, too, was just, it hit me on every level, man. I remember, I mentioned it before, but I remember going to see Beauty and the Beast and seeing the trailer for this movie and seeing my mom's reaction to the trailer of the movie. It's just, she had this warm feeling of like, being someone who's 100% Latina and being someone who has that connection to Disney and finally seeing a representation of Latinos in a Disney movie is just, you can't, it's like the most amazing thing you could ever tell to a lifetime fan of Disney movies, which is my mother. So I took her to see this movie on Thanksgiving when it came out, and it's just one of those experiences you get where it you can't describe it in words as far as how much it means to you, because it really does mean a lot to you, and the music in this movie just hits you on so many different levels. And the connections that they have to family in this movie is so relatable on a very, obviously, on a very Latino sense, because you feel that connection to it, because you're like, that's what I grew up with. That's how abuelitas are like. That's how my family is like. And it's just a beautiful movie, man. And it like kicks you in the heart so much with the emotional aspects of it, and with the music, and with the Day of the Dead stuff, and with the basically the premise of the movie and the message of the movie being about family and love and what can last lifetimes, and how connections can last lifetimes, and about forgiveness, and about being reborn, and all this stuff that just feels to be the most Latino movie that I've ever seen. And it's a Disney Pixar movie, and it's just so freaking good. And there's something about an animated movie hitting you emotionally that I feel like, you might disagree with me on this, but I feel like I almost feel more emotionally invested when it's an animated movie than when it's a live action movie. But I felt like everything hit every single front, whether it be the music, the animation, the voice actors. I can't lie, man, having true Mexican, having true Latino talent, like even just be voices. They're not even, you don't even see their faces. You just hear Gael Garcia Bernal do the voice of the main skeleton guy, and you hear the voices, and you hear the accents, and you hear a true representation of what a Latino is just so rejuvenating and exciting, and it's just so powerful, and it shows why representation matters in films, even if it's an animated film, and how much more it can deliver if it's a live action film, and how many people went out to see this movie and related to this movie, even if they weren't Latino, or if they were Latino. Like that, to me, just shows so many different layers of how powerful this movie is. And that's why it's one of my favorites of the year.
Right. This movie was originally submitted. When Hollywood films are submitted to China to be shown there, they have to go through like the board of review through the Chinese government. And initially, the board had not had canceled Coco because it's dealing with Day of the Dead, and Chinese government doesn't want propaganda about death being put into their country. But like after they saw Coco and after they watched what the film was about, they eventually let it back in because it's not a movie about death. It's a movie about life. It's a movie about celebrating people who are alive and celebrating people who have passed on but still living on in their legacy. And it's just such a great, and how the memory of somebody, of a memory of a family member, is just as crucial to it's crucial. It's important to remember what came before and who came before you, but it's also important to break out of what your family might want you. I mean, his whole arc in the story is him wanting just to cobble shoes, but his revelation, and obviously the movie's more about than just the music, but it's the music is a big part of why these decisions being made, why he's making these choices. And eventually he learns that putting family first and putting your family first is always going to be most important, and then you'll work to achieve your goals through that. So it's such a beautiful motion picture, and I think like I said before, is one of Pixar's best. So.
Absolutely, yeah. It's one of those movies that it just deserves all the attention that it's getting, and I feel like it should lay down a foundation for future movies that have more Latino representation and more Latino representation that is authentic and not subdued, not put to the side, and not villainized. Because I've talked a lot about how some of the kind of shows and the kind of representation we see in media, whether it be TV or whether it be movies, it's always some sort of drug cartel that's going to shoot your head or cut your head off. That's always what it is. Like, Mexicans are trying to shoot you, and it's the white guy trying to stop the bad Mexican guy from killing his family because he sells drugs, aka Breaking Bad. I love Breaking Bad, but that's what it's about. So for me, it's like that's why it's refreshing to see positive representation and good representation of what a Latino movie can be about. And that's why Coco is amazing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I 100% agree. So I guess we're moving on to my number 5.
Top 5. Yeah. Let's do it. Let's go.
There's gonna be a little, we're gonna go a little more in depth with these. So we could just kick it off first. My number 5 of the year, pretty recent release that came out in December, one of the later releases. And coming from one of my favorite directors of all time, and starring probably what many would argue to be the greatest actor of all time, Daniel Day-Lewis, starring in Phantom Thread. Yeah, this is a film I saw in 70mm at the ArcLight Hollywood. And this movie blew my mind, Ace. It blew my mind how much I love this film. Because I said, Paul Thomas Anderson is one of my favorites. Of course, I love his old stuff when it comes to like Boogie Nights, Magnolia, the Adam Sandler one, Punch Drunk Love, and Hard 8. I think that was his first feature. So his early features all resonate with me on all different levels. But then when you go into like his mid to late 2000s stuff, where you talk about There Will Be Blood and The Master and Inherent Vice, which I didn't really love, but a lot of people regarded as great, and I thought it was cool. It was a little bit of the departure, but it was a little hard to understand. But to me, Phantom Thread was like he's back, and he's here to tell you like, no, I'm not kidding around this time. He uses every aspect of filmmaking. He overuses it. Like I talk about how Arrival was my favorite movie of last year because every piece of it, the music, the editing, the manipulation of the writing, all kind of came together to create this inherent sense of circular motion. That's for Arrival. This movie takes every aspect of filmmaking, whether it comes from sound, from score, from acting and performances, and overextends that to reach a theme of like manipulation, and how Daniel Day-Lewis's character, who's this fashion designer, who brings in like young women to like model and muse from, and like I guess like like sleep with them, I guess. I mean, I don't know, it's not really, never make it 100% clear, but that he does this, but then the movie kind of, and pardon me for forgetting the young woman's name who
Vicky
plays
Krieps.
Vicky Krieps. She comes in and like almost twisted on his head, and like it goes into like this series of like them trying to one up each other. It's almost like a cat and mouse until the end, where it's like, and I don't want to spoil it, but the end where
don't spoil it.
Yeah, there's this thing, and then it's like. And I don't know, it's just so like when I remember watching
interesting.
There was she reveals to him like this thing that she did, and there's like this 20 seconds of silence, man. And I'm telling you, I was never more on the edge of my seat. Like, what is this dude gonna do? What's gonna happen? And like he says something, and I'm like, oh, dude, this is exactly what I want. And then when you go back and think about the movie over again, it all completely makes sense. So I don't know, man. To me,
It's so funny to hear you say this, man. I just saw this movie.
Yeah, what'd you
like
think
5 days ago. I enjoyed it. Yeah, I definitely not as much as you did.
Yeah, no,
because it sounds like you loved it. But yeah, it's definitely interesting when that happens, and when you find out what's going on in this relationship. It's absolutely interesting. And yeah, Daniel Day-Lewis, man, he's GOAT.
Mm-hmm.
But I really. It's so I found it, you know what I found refreshing in this movie?
Mm-hmm.
The fact that it's about a fashion designer.
Yeah.
Not a writer, not an actor, not a businessman or something like that, but a fashion designer. It's like really strange in a certain way. When you think about the mastermind or the artist of clothes, which is something that obviously, as you can tell, I don't know anything about.
Right.
But it's one of those things where you're right. And I went to a Q&A with this one, with Vicky, and they pronounced it creeps. So I was like, sure, creeps. And the actual costume designer in this movie, Mark Bridges, I think his name is, who obviously
give that man an Oscar.
Give that man an Oscar. That guy's a real star of this movie, man. Those clothes, I was like, man, these are dope, dresses, and it's about a fashion designer, so obviously it's very, precious to him. But yeah, man, that score, you really mentioned it. That score, it stuck with me so much. That score really did. Like that piano that plays along the entire movie.
It goes the entire movie.
The
movie's an hour and 30 minutes.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, not hour and 30 minutes.
It's 2 hours,
2 hours and 10 minutes. Yeah. It's 2 hours and 10 minutes, and music's literally 92 minutes in the movie. So like it plays nonstop. Even when there's other music playing, it's still going in the background. Which is like that's crazy. And I think that's all part of putting you inside of the head of Daniel Day-Lewis, which to me, God, I hope this is not his last performance, because he probably went on like a suit. To me, is like one of his best, and he defines his character so well from the very beginning. Just from his mannerisms, like you understand who this guy is right from the top, and then, but through the filmmaking, you really get deep understanding. I mean, I don't know if you remember that scene where she was making breakfast, or she was eating breakfast while he was like trying to read the paper, but like she's like buttering her toast, and it sounds like somebody's like scraping metal. Like it was like the most insane thing. And then like, but again, it's to show like his idiocracies and how his preferences and his pet peeves are like so meticulous and like so it's strange where she has to deal with that. So that to me was excellent.
Yeah. It's like dealing with the mind of a master artist and kind of a woman coming into his life and kind of disrupting his, like you said, his like mannerisms and the way he lives his life and his schedule and everything that he works out perfectly. Yeah, it's very interesting in that sense. And obviously, like you said before, it gets a little weird and twisted at the end of it.
Yeah,
you love that twist.
Yeah. I was like, whoa, this is crazy.
Yeah.
So yeah, to me, this is one of Paul Thomas Anderson's.
And that's your number 5, right?
That's my number 5. Yeah. So I'm so happy, that I got to see it first off in the 70mm presentation. Excellent.
Don't get me started on that, man, because I didn't see it in 70mm.
Oh, really?
And it really hurt. Because I was like, oh, man, because it looks like it would be amazing in 70mm.
Yeah.
Like the way the movie was shot itself. Yeah. It's just beautiful.
Cinematography.
The production design was great, too.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Like every aspect of, like you said, every aspect that we saw in it was just very, very, very tight and very well handled. My number 5, because I'm on number 5, right? My number 5 was a movie that was going to be in my top 3, if not top 2. It dropped down a little bit when I saw 2 other movies and when I realized what one movie meant to me personally, because I know you're going to be surprised as how high it is, but it just meant a lot to me. My number 5 is Lady Bird.
Oh, really? Okay.
Lady Bird was going to be around 2 or 3.
Yeah.
Ended up being number 5, still in my top 5. It's
Right.
still, I've talked a lot about this movie. We went to see it together. This movie is one of the best directed movies of the year. I've said that many,
Oh,
many
yeah.
times, but I
Without a
still
doubt.
100% agree that Greta Gerwig directed one of the most tightly, perfectly directed movie I've seen in a long time. Even though it's a very small story and a very personal story, it doesn't take away from the directing of the movie. Because obviously there's bigger directors like Nolan or like other big name directors who directed larger movies, but her small movie was very tightly directed. The editing in this movie is incredible, and you could see her hand in that, in the post-production, which I feel like is something that is not given enough credit to directors, is when they're really good at having a hand in post-production. Great directors do great work in post-production, and I feel like she did that in this movie. But overall, this movie is just about a coming-of-age story of a teenage girl with Saoirse Ronan, who delivers a fantastic performance in this movie. And it really is all about, just like I said before with Coco, all about family and all about dealing with what you feel to be your personal issues and your personal take on life and what is happening with your life, and realizing that when you see it through the lens of your parents, it comes from a different perspective, and it comes from a different point of view where they're trying their best to give you what they think is appropriate, and you're trying your best to separate away from that,
Right.
and be like, I just want to move away, I just want to have my own life. And then when you have your own life, you're like, damn, I miss my mom so bad.
Right.
Where's my mom at? I need my mom. And that's kind of what we see at the end of the movie. And it just is so beautifully well handled. And it really shows two big personalities, and having a daughter with a big personality and a mother with a big personality, and how she always sticks to herself. Both women do, both of them. Saoirse Ronan's Lady Bird sticks to her own, beliefs and ideals and art and all that, and her mom does too. She believes what she believes, and they kind of butt heads with that. And I told you after watching the movie, the scene where she's going to the airport and everything and taking off, and Laura Metcalf is like crying on her way out, kind of like just being upset, and then turning back around is just so powerful, because it really makes you feel like that's the connection of a true mother, that no matter how stubborn they are, they're still like, man, that's my daughter, and no matter how stubborn a teenage daughter can be, that's my mother, and we see that connection handled so well in this movie. And it's just, it's the perfect combination between comedy and heart. And I think you said that after the movie. I'm taking your words, but it's just a beautifully directed movie, well handled movie, and just really hit me, especially at the end of the movie when you kind of see what comes full circle. Right. And the thing they do with the name in this movie, like what was the point of Lady Bird? I thought it was just, I told you, I thought it was just to be quirky and eccentric.
Right.
But it really was a defining thing for her. She didn't want to define herself by the name that her parents gave her. Right. She wanted to define her own name and her own thing. Right. And then at the end of the movie, she realizes that she's still a part of that heritage and a part of that family, and she still represents that name because of her parents, and almost as a necklace to wear of representation of her mom and her dad is her name. The biggest thing you carry with you that your parents gave you is your name. No matter what, that's something that you have. And I felt like that was so powerful, because I was like, man, I didn't catch that till the very end of the movie, and I'm like, oh, that's why. That to me was so powerful, because that shows her writing coming full circle, Greta Gerwig's writing coming full circle, and showing you the purpose of something that you might think is just, it's a cute title, Lady Bird. No, it's really about defining yourself and showing who you are and trying to discover who you are. And you discover that your family has always been a part of you, even if you didn't want them to be a part of you.
Right. No, I 100% agree. I mean, this is a little higher on my list, so we're going to talk about it a little later, but I mean, everything that you said is right on the money. I mean, the whole thing with the name, I mean, that's also that was a smaller theme, I feel like, in Frances Ha, her last film that she wrote and starred in, and was directed by Noah Baumbach, who's also on this list for My Whole Story. But yeah, it's a theme that she carried in that for just a little bit. It was like a little hint, but this movie made it come like fully all the way around. And the setting of this film, being set when it was set 2002 Sacramento, playing such a big part into the way people look at each other, and I don't know, it was just all around. It was just excellent movie. I mean, again, I'm gonna mention it more once it gets to that part of the list.
Get you. What's your number 4?
My number 4. Moving on to the number 4. Okay, so this is another Netflix picture that we have here.
Oh, I know what it is.
Yeah, this is a film that I didn't even know was coming out until like I started seeing reviews pop up for it, I guess, and people buzzing about it. It's the new pardon me if I pronounce the name wrong, Bong Joon-ho film. And that is Okja. Okja is absolutely one of my favorite movies of the year. It's very, it's a heartfelt, it's both a mixture of a heartfelt kids, like puppy, like puppy and kid, kind of movie. But it's also just like this really elaborate globalist message of environmentalism and how important it is to protect the environment and how important it is to protect the animals and these gigantic pigs that have been like genetically created and how that influences the way society starts looking at animals and how there's like these giant pigs that we all idolize, but then eventually they're just going to be killed and used for meat. So it's crazy to me how amazing this film is. I love it nonstop. A lot of people criticize it for being too over the top. I think I love it. To me, this is, and you might disagree. I mean, you're much more of an anime fan than me, but to me, this is what live action anime would almost kind of feel like. You know,
100% live action anime.
Yeah. Like this is so. You can even like Jake Gyllenhaal's character in this is straight out of like an anime or a manga like type of character who's just goofy, wacky, doing his thing. And that's another thing. The cast in this movie.
It's a great cast.
Yeah, Jake Gyllenhaal.
Jake, who's one of my favorite actors.
Right. And Tilda Swinton. Who else? Paul Dano. The list is like nonstop of all the
guy
talented.
from Breaking Bad is in this too. Giovanni something.
Oh, right.
Italian homie?
Yeah, the guy who was Gus.
Gus, yeah, Gus Fring.
He's in this. Yeah, there's so many, and the young girl who plays I can't remember the character's name either.
I don't either.
She's amazing. I don't know, just
Steven Yeun. Shout out to Steven Yeun, my homie.
Steven Yeun, yeah.
Glenn from The Walking Dead.
Yeah, he's in this. Yeah, small part. It's just all around, just an incredible. I mean, listen, it's gonna divide people. I get it. Like, it's not for everybody.
It's not. It really is. It's like anime is not for anyone.
Yeah, right.
It's not for everybody.
But I get the argument. It's like so over the top. It's so beating you over the head with it. I don't know. I loved it, and I love the ambition that they're going for.
It's real dark too, especially towards the end. It has some real dark moments.
Yeah,
like a little too dark.
Yeah, I mean, there's one part in particular where even I was like, oh, I can't watch this.
Yeah.
Oh, are you kidding me? I mean, again, it's just a film that it just kind of speaks to what's happening globally across the world and how we need to start reconsidering the way we, it's not like it's one of those movies that are made to like make you feel like you should be a vegetarian, but it's also a movie that's also like, maybe we should start paying more attention to the way the government is handling our meat and our products and like all that stuff.
It really is a pro-vegetarian message, and I can't lie. For 2 days, I was like, man, I don't know if I can eat meat again. And then 2 days later, I'm like chomping on a cheeseburger.
Yeah.
So I felt it, but it was like, I'm too hungry.
Listen, you can show me all the meat, vegetarian documentaries you want. I'm still gonna be eating meat. I'm sorry. All right.
I'm the same way, dude. Yeah. I've tried. Trust me, I've tried for a good 2 days, 3 days. I was a vegetarian for 3 days. But yeah, absolutely, man. This movie is definitely a interesting, different type of movie. I definitely agree with that assessment of it for sure. It's definitely I like the combination of the Korean film type thing where it's like it's half Korean, half American, and it has like this combination of both with Korean
big American cast and big budget,
and then also Korean cast and and it's one of those films too where the one moment that got me in this movie, and I can't lie, it really did get me. It probably put a lot of people away, but for me, I was in for the movie. Was the scene where she's running away in that mall and then You Fill Up My Senses starts playing by what's his name, John Denver. And you fill up my senses, and I was like, dang it, you got me. I love you, pig. I love you. Save that pig, because that it's such an emotional song. But yeah, man, I feel you with this movie. This movie's definitely a different, interesting movie. I think you liked it more than anyone else.
Yeah, dude. I mean,
I don't think anyone has it in their top 10, much less top 5.
A lot of people put it in their worst list, which again I get, but it's just like this movie to me. I remember watching this film and immediately thinking, "Oh, this is one of."
You told me.
Yeah. I just salute to Netflix, man. I mean, doing original content like this, I'm always gonna apply that. Like I mentioned, My West Story, Okja, and Mudbound are three incredible movies, and they've just been killing it. They have made a couple bad ones. I gotta show them love as much as hate. Death Note was garbage, but salute.
I still feel like they made some. I mean, I liked War Machine. You didn't like War Machine.
I didn't like War Machine.
I liked War Machine. I liked The Incredible Jessica James, I think was the name of the movie. It's a real small one, but that was a Netflix one too.
To the Bone is one that I
To the Bone
I
was
watched.
Another one.
Yeah.
You mentioned Death Note. I saw Death Note a few times.
I mean,
there was Bright. They made Bright too,
Bright,
which was like an okay movie.
I thought it was cool.
I thought it was all right.
It's not
bad.
Nothing's gonna be as bad as Death Note. Let's be real. I mean, I don't know how we saw.
I didn't hate
Death
it.
Note.
I saw it when it premiered at Comic-Con.
Comic-Con,
Because I reviewed it with Emma, who hated it.
I'm more on Emma's side, I think.
I didn't hate it. I didn't like it either. I gave it a 2.5, I think is what I gave it out of 5 schmoes. Which is the same way I feel about it. 2.5. I like Lakeith Stanfield's L. I thought he was cool. Everything else didn't work for me. But I thought Lakeith was cool.
Let's not shit on Netflix though. Netflix, if you're watching this, get your boy an internship, man. Let's get going.
You've said that about Warner Brothers, about Disney, about Kevin Feige.
Hire your boy. Don't you
Pixar.
Don't you see me wearing the tie? Come on, y'all. Hey, there we go. Netflix. Let's
shout out to Netflix. Start promoting your movies, man.
Yeah. I love you though, Netflix. Oh, just great.
I'll get to my number 4. My number 4 movie of the year is a movie that I had on my top 10, and it was gonna be in my top 10. And no matter what anyone said, it was gonna be my top 10. I don't care what anyone says. And the more and more I thought about it, I'm like, screw it. This movie's top 5 for me. There's no movie. I walked out of this movie so excited and so hype and so happy and so satisfied. And I legitimately thought, I was like, I don't think there's a movie that I don't think there's. I went to see it with my friend Rob, who you've met Rob before, and I walked out and I turned to him and I was like, I don't think I can name one bad thing in that movie. And it's so much fun, and it's the most fun I've had at the movies in such a long time, and that is Thor Ragnarok.
I knew it.
Thor Ragnarok is my number 4 movie of the year. It's the best superhero movie of the year. You hear that, Logan? It's the best superhero movie of the year. That's just my opinion. Obviously, everyone's going to disagree with me. But I thought it was just one of those movies that the perfection that I saw in the first Guardians of the Galaxy, when I first walked out of the first Guardians, and I realized what they were doing as far as making a comic book movie so tongue-in-cheek, so self-referential, so self-aware, so funny, and not taking itself seriously at all, that I clicked on me because I was so used to like enjoying movies like The Dark Knight and all that, and it clicked, and I was like, man, Guardians is like my favorite MCU movie, and I realized that the reason why I loved it so much was because it didn't take itself seriously, was because it was so over-the-top funny, and because all the crazy, wacky characters. That's the exact same feeling I had with Thor Ragnarok. Super over the top, super goofy, didn't take it so seriously at all. It was just the most self-referential, fun, goofy comic book movie ever, with my favorite Avenger, which is Thor, and just him kicking ass and having fun, and Hulk, and the score of the movie was just so freaking good. That score is something that not a lot of people are talking about. The directing by Taika Waititi was just so freaking good. This movie to me was just, I couldn't find a flaw in this movie. I was like, man, I want to be like the cool, like edgy guy who's like, no, it wasn't even that cool. It was just too funny. It didn't have serious moments, y'all. Why does it got to be funny though? No, and I was like,
why are you doing an impression of me, Ace?
No, but
why are you doing an impression of
it's
me,
not
Ace?
you. It's not you. It's like people tweeting at me. It's like, oh, why does it got to be funny? Why can't it be like, I'm tired of all this MCU funny stuff. And I'm like, you know what? It was beyond, let me take it beyond comedy. It is one of the best directed movies of the year in the sense of score, in the sense of visual effects, in the sense of story, in the sense of character moments, in the sense of the comedic moments, the comedic beats in this movie it hit so well. I just felt like this movie was legitimately like perfect. It made my top 3 MCU movies. I told you that before. And it's one of those movies that it just hit me on every level, whether it comes to like badass moments, cool moments. I love the freaking Immigrant song playing in the 2 times that it played in the movie. It was just like, that was me. As soon as they start playing Led Zeppelin and an Immigrant song, I'm in 100%. I love this movie so much. And I feel like it's the perfect comic book movie where it's just one big goofy comedy. And for me, it's like one of those things where what people liked about Deadpool is what I liked about this movie. I think this movie did comedy way better than Deadpool. I think it hit those comedic moments way better than Deadpool. And to me, this is one of those movies that it just stuck with me so much because of the character and because of the focus on being just a goofy, fun time. Boom, Thor Ragnarok.
Hey, I'm not gonna argue on your pick, man. I mean, I enjoyed it. I liked it a lot.
Yeah.
I had some problems with it, but it's nice that we have a new MCU movie that's still trying different things, right? It has a different style of comedy, different style of humor, and I think there are some legitimately like great moments. I mean, there's that one like really cool shot where like they're like walking and then the camera like pans down and it's like an upside down image of I'm actually walking in verse. I don't know. It was like a crazy like shot. I was like, whoa, that's tripping me out. That was dope. And then there's, when we talk about the directing, at least when there's that whole thing with the Valkyries and they're
so cool.
fighting Hela, like that was amazing.
Yep.
That was one of the most visually stunning shots I've seen. So again, a lot of those moments hit really well. And I think that, I don't know. I mean, this movie will probably go down as the best Thor movie that a lot of people regard it as. One of the best Marvel movies, Taika Waititi adding into his collection of films that continue to evolve in his style and his sensibility. And the fact they did that with a big budget Marvel movie like this is amazing. Korg was great. Korg was great. Keith, I'm sorry, not Keith Urban. Jesus, what's wrong with me today? Carl Urban's character, I forget his name, but he was great. Idris Elba was good. Good to see him back. He did way more in this than he has to do in like Thor: The Dark World, which was like, what was he even doing in that movie? But I'm glad to see him here. He was like actually an active part, and he was involved in the fight, and he was like kicking ass, and that was really amazing. I just wish he would have cracked a smile. At least give me one smile, man. Everybody else in this movie's cracking jokes. He's just the only dude that's like dead serious throughout the entire thing.
Hey, man, you need one of those guys who needs to take it seriously once in a while.
When the world's like about to end.
Hey, man, sometimes you just need to crack a joke.
Yeah.
But for also, this movie was legitimately, I think, the only time in a movie this year where I legitimately like couldn't help but like fist pump, and I'm not a fist pump guy, but I went like that when the Led Zeppelin song started playing in the second part, when he like comes out as like God of Thunder, and then he comes out and his like eyes are lightning. You see it in the trailer, and it's like lightning all over himself. It's like and he's just like kick. I was like, get him, Thor, kick ass, Thor. Like I felt like a little kid, dude. Like that's so rare in a movie for me. That makes me feel like a little kid again. And that I love that. And I told you before last week, I love that Taika Waititi made a movie that's very Kiwi, very New Zealandy, very Australian, very like he didn't shy away from his culture, from his heritage, from his brand of comedy that he's done for years. Right. Very Flight of the Conchords type comedy, very like that type of style that he did in all his movies previously. He brought it into a giant budget MCU movie, and that to me is just like badass.
I will say one of the funniest parts of like any movie this year was when like Thor and Loki were like walking the streets of New York, and somebody like comes to take a picture with Thor. And he's just like immediately like, and like goes back. That was just hysterical to me. Like
that was a great moment.
Yeah.
And it made total sense too.
Yeah.
Also, the scene where Doctor Strange has Loki falling, and he's like, "I've been falling for 30 minutes." I was like, "That's so Tom Hiddleston." And it's a great Tom Hiddleston too. This is the best. I love seeing, because I've talked about Loki before, because everyone talks about like Loki is the best villain, and I'm like, look at this movie, he's not a villain, dude. Like he's not.
He's on the good side in this movie. Like,
yeah, but at the same, I don't know. I just like seeing this Loki. I don't like. I mean, Loki's always going to be like the mischief and trying to plant something evil, but at the same time, he's just like, He's just a goofy guy that you want to hang out with.
Yeah, yeah,
I don't know.
yeah.
I just love this movie so much. So yeah, it made my top 4 movies of the year, and I was just like, screw it. I don't care if it's that high. And
Yeah.
people are gonna be like, well, what about the indie movies? And I'm like, I love those, but I really did feel like this one hit me just as hard as any other indie movie this year.
Right, right, right. So we're
Top
moving on to
three?
my number three. This is top three, son. This is gonna be getting into a little bit of tricky territory. Now I know this may or may not be in your list. So I'll say what I gotta say, my piece on it. But this next movie is a film that will always and forever be ingrained into our culture. I feel like this is a film that we are going to be talking about for years to come. The fact that this movie came out in February and is still the hot topic of conversation, and that is Jordan Peele's directorial debut, Get Out, is my number 3 movie of the year. This movie to me is almost the definition of a perfect horror movie. It's fun, it's exciting, it's energetic, it's taking creative merit from a lot of different places, whether you're talking about, the idea of the sunken place, that being, such a cool, reflective metaphor for what a lot of African Americans have to deal with in society in terms of like being their voices being closeted or shadowed and not having the opportunity to express the pain that they're inflicted with is so fascinating. And of course it's taking homage to the Being John Malkovich, that movie with Kathleen Keener, right? That the connection there. I mentioned that before on this podcast, but I love that connection. I love that really all parts of this movie are reflective of like greater metaphors that we are dealing with in our community, whether it be discrimination, neoliberalism, how how the face of society is different than like the underlying intentions that we have to deal with as people of color, and as and again, this movie doesn't just relate to Black people; it relates to all people, right? To all minorities who have been shelved, who have been disadvantaged, who have been disenfranchised throughout hundreds, if not thousands, of years of oppression, not just from American culture, but just through culture in general. And I'm glad to see this movie succeeding so well and getting the big Oscar push that it's getting, frankly, because like you can watch a movie like this and it getting 99% Rotten Tomatoes and being nominated for Best Picture and cast and like all these awards. The fact that it's getting that kind of attention just shows you how great this film has gone on to reflect the current times that we're in. I don't think there's been a more topical movie this year. I don't think there's been a more profitable movie this year. We talked about it last week on the directors show, how this movie was made for, what was it, 1.5 million or something like that.
I think it was 4.5.
4.5 million probably, and then but it made over 200. What is it? 300 million worldwide.
Almost at 3. I think it's 285 right now.
285 million off a $7 million budget.
Yeah,
that is amazing. That is unreal. So I
think it's the most profitable movie of all time.
Right. I believe it because like it's just so. I mean that's amazing. And then plus a lot of people going into it were already like writing it off. Oh, it's just Jordan Peele he's doing. But it's a legitimately great movie. And I think the fact that this movie came out and made such a splash nationwide with all the people. You talked about it earlier in this list, which a movie we both enjoy, and how that movie kind of hit with a lot of people. I think Get Out resonated just as significantly as well. And I think implementing the comedic elements that we see in this movie with Laurel Jr. I'm sorry, Laurel. Laurel. I think that's his name. I'm not sure his last name, but him in this movie, the guy who plays the TSA guy, he's great. Allison Williams, I believe her name is, who plays the girlfriend, is great. The guy who plays the dad is fantastic. David Quill is like quietly putting on one of the best performances of the year.
People are starting to pay attention to him now. Daniel Kaluuya, he's. I mean, I'll say my piece. Go ahead.
Right. No, it's just all around brilliance. And I had a Twitter thread earlier in the year where I talked about why calling Get Out a comedy is not necessarily such a bad thing. And I think the reason it's so effective is because of the way it implements the comedic elements and its satire and how people can relate to satire and can relate to some of the more egregious elements and tropes that exist in horror movies, and how this movie manipulates and subverses those tropes in a way that's funny and legitimately scary. So again, this is one of the best movies of the year. Is my number 3, and is getting rave all around the board. So
there you go, man.
it.
Cool. I'm gonna jump into my number 3 because I'll talk about that one later. My number 3 movie of the year is a movie that I'm pretty sure you haven't seen. I'm pretty sure no one has seen listening to this. Well, I'm assuming I'll get 1 or 2 people who will, pump their fist up in the air that I mentioned this movie. But this movie technically came out last year, but I looked it up and it had a U.S. release this year. Okay. So if you look up this release date for this movie, it'll turn up in 2017, which came out April 2017 for like 2 weeks in theaters. No joke, 2 weeks in theaters. Okay. And that's a Japanese anime movie called Your Name.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I don't know if you've heard of this movie.
I've heard of it, yes.
This freaking movie. Absolutely. I mean, think about it this way. I saw Coco this year.
right.
And as far as animated movies go, I ranked this one higher than Coco.
Okay.
And even on an emotional level, this one higher than Coco.
Right.
This movie absolutely is one of the biggest emotional journeys I've ever gone on in an animated movie. It just is so freaking well done. So essentially the movie is it's essentially a body swapping movie. So it's essentially like something happens in the cosmos that causes a guy and a girl to swap bodies in different parts of Japan. So the girl is like in the rural kind of farming area of Japan, and the guy lives in Tokyo in Japan, and they both swap bodies, and from there they're living one day at a time in their own bodies. So they lose a day of time every time they switch. So every time they switch, it's like, hey, what did you do today in my body? And they have to tell each other what's going on.
Yeah.
So it's kind of this weird kind of like funny anime, body swapping thing, and that's essentially what you think the movie is going to be about. And or you think it's going to be like, oh, you get to know me, you start to fall in love with me, and what it turns into is one of the craziest sci-fi journeys that I've ever gone on, that talks about time and space and time travel and the ability to consciousness and the conscious level of connection and the memory level of connection and what memories can mean and lifetimes and just some of the biggest freaking questions that we have in our life and in our lifetime and in humanity. And it's just handled so expertly well. And it's handled in a way that you feel like, even if I'm not the kind of guy who would enjoy, I'm not the anime love story guy. I'm more of the anime horror, Attack on Titan, crazy violent stuff kind of guy. And yet this movie hit me because of the way it interprets connection and the way it interprets connections between people and love between people and memories between people and heritage and tradition and family tradition. And just it's absolutely beautifully spectacular and gorgeous. It's one of the greatest animated movies I've seen in a long time. The score in this movie will obliterate you in itself as far as an emotional aspect of it. And it's just, by the end of the movie, you're literally like gripping your chair and gripping your seat, just so freaking out by you don't know what to expect or what's coming next. And that to me was just so amazing because of the initial premise of a movie being so simple and so Disney throwaway, Disney Channel original movie type premise, right? That's something you see like a Freaky Friday, and yet it turned out to be one of the most emotionally powerful movies that I've seen in a long time, and a movie that really, really, really stuck with me. And again, as I mentioned before, a true sci-fi movie that pushes boundaries of definitions between people and definitions between connections and definitions between time and space and reality and memories, and just it's just so freaking good that it just devastated me on every level. And I love this movie, and I really, really, really want people to go out and watch this movie. It's called Your Name.
Yeah. I haven't seen this movie. I have heard of it. It's really interesting that this movie ranked over Coco. So does it have like a big emotional core to it? Is that what we're looking at?
It really is. Yeah,
Okay.
It really is an emotional aspect of it that I did not expect.
Okay.
Again, I expected a happy-go-lucky anime movie, and what I got was just it's part emotional, it's part love story. But again, I really feel like if I'm gonna sell you on this movie, whoever's listening, the sci-fi aspect of this movie is so freaking cool. It's so cool. Like that's probably what you'll connect to the most of it. If you watch this movie, or anyone else who is not an anime fan, they'll connect to the sci-fi aspect of this movie. That it's something that it's kind of like it asks questions of past events and past time and stuff like that I've never seen done in film before.
Right.
It's really amazing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome, man.
Yeah, you don't have anything to say about it because you've never seen this movie.
Yeah,
you're like, all right, cool. My number 2.
I'm not gonna lie. Like when you start describing it, like that's the first time I've actually heard the plot of this movie.
Oh,
I'm
really?
not gonna lie.
There you go.
I really want to see it. I've heard nothing but great things about it,
Yeah.
and it's your number 3. So
It's my number 3.
Gotta check it out. So for my number 2, we're looking at a repeat one here. It was on your list previously.
Oh, wow, that high.
Yeah. You know, we were talking about how it was number 5 for you, and this is number 2 for me. Lady Bird, son.
Dang.
This is where that ranks. I remember walking out. I was like, damn. Like I remember walking out. I was like, this is either gonna be number 1 or number. Like it's gonna be fighting.
Yeah.
For the whole like.
It's one of the favorites of the year. I
Yeah.
remember we both said that walking out.
Yeah. And this movie to me is just. It still blows my mind how much was accomplished in just a short amount of time within this film. It's equal parts like artsy and like quirky, but it's also equal parts like readily accessible and so relatable. I mean, you know, it could be, you know, even though it's about like a little white girl and, you know, who's like in 2002 Sacramento, but even for me as a 20-year-old black man from Compton, like I still relate to it
still
equally
related
as much. Like, so
that was what I said too. I was
Yeah.
like, it's gonna be like a teenage girl story. I'm not gonna relate to this. I related to a teenage 17-year-old girl from Sacramento.
Yeah.
I was like, what? I relate to her.
Right. It's mind blowing.
Yeah.
How great and just simplistic its ideas are, and I think this is one of the few movies this year that actually touches on the idea of like depression and how depression affects more people than like people are readily able to accept, and how some people's behavior, like Lady Bird's, some of the things she says, it really affects her mother and father in a way that's, you know, powerful, and I think just overall this movie just works on many different levels, and how, you know, it's also, I mean, I relate to it because I remember when I was trying to go off to college, I was considering like leaving state too, and then like how that affect me and how that affect my family dynamic too. So, I mean, again, everybody can relate to it because it's so universal, and even if you're not going through the exact situations that Lady Bird is going through, the relationship between her mother and pardon me for forgetting
Laurie Metcalf.
Laura Metcalf, yeah, the relationship between Laura Metcalf and Saoirse Ronan is, you know, is something that is unbreakable, and that we see in a lot of it's something we can see in a lot of movies, but we don't see going into that depth. And the emotional resolution at the end just matters all the much more.
So good.
And yeah, so it's just it's crazy to me. And by the way, I mean, not enough people are talking about the score by John Bryan, who did the score for this movie. Honestly, like I love The Shape of Water, I love Dunkirk, I love all the other movies that are being considered for best original score, but this to me is the music of the year. This to me is the original score of the year, even though soundtrack's only like 27 minutes too, so it's very short. But to me, it's like this music is, I've been listening to it like nonstop, like on loop, and they're really short bits of like soundtrack, but they all like put you in a certain emotional place and guide you through the narrative. And listening to the music of this movie just on its own, just as like a piece of music and not as something as a movie, is still telling a same kind of story that this movie's telling, you know, through the visuals, but it's telling that story through the music. And so it's absolutely amazing. I think every aspect of this movie, coming down to the editing, I mean, there's that great opening sequence where she just jumps out of the car. It's in the trailer.
They do
a lot of stuff in this movie. Matters.
I told my friend, and it's one of those things that's not being mentioned as much. The editing.
Yeah.
They do jump cuts in this movie so well, and they do it a lot.
Yeah.
To the point that you notice it, and yet it's so well done.
Yeah.
Like there's obviously the one you mentioned, the one in the trailer, and then it cuts to her in church.
Right.
There's another one where she's like at a corner store and she buys like a magazine.
Yeah.
And then it cuts to her reading it.
Yeah.
And you're kind of like shocked by it.
Right.
And then there's another. It does it so much. It does jump cuts so well.
Yeah.
Like so perfectly well, that it's just amazing. And like the editing in this movie is phenomenal.
Yeah, it's definitely. I mean, it should go without saying that Greta Gerwig will always and forever have a career in this business, because just from this movie alone, just one of the biggest splashes I've seen a director as of recently. So
Absolutely.
this is amazing. I of course is my number 2. So
There you go.
yeah.
My number 2 is a movie that I saw earlier this year, and it's one of those movies that it just stuck with me so much. And I debated so hard to put it in my number 1. It just barely missed out because I had to measure every single aspect of the movie. But speaking of emotional, this year's been very emotional for me because I just put so many emotional movies like in my top 10 list, and I usually put like, I don't know, something more gritty or something. But this movie is an emotional destruction, and it's thought provoking. It's weird. It's emotionally disturbing. It asks questions without asking the questions. It's absolutely odd. It's absolutely the most indie movie I've seen probably as far as indie movie films this year. And that movie is A Ghost Story. A Ghost Story is my number 2 movie of the year. This movie is one of those artsy films that a lot of people hate, absolutely hate. And I loved it. It's about, obviously, I've talked about it before on the Schmoes No Show, but it's about essentially a couple, a very newlywed couple, and it's Casey Affleck and Rooney Mara. And Casey Affleck loses his life early in the film, and he's basically haunting her as literally a ghost in a bedsheet. And it's so odd to see that image visually striking, but it's almost like flipping it on its head kind of thing, where you take something that's supposed to be very odd and very kind of comedic and very traditionally like the comedic representation of a ghost, and it becomes this kind of representation of what it is to not move on in life and what it is to stay attached to something in this world that is not allowing you to take the next step in the afterlife, whether, you know, it be heaven or hell. But it's one of those things where the emotional journey that this bedsheet is going through is the most deep emotional journey that I've been on all year. And that to me is so powerful, based on the directing of David Lowery, who directed this movie. It says this movie is essentially a silent film. The first 10 minutes of the movie, you'll hear talking, and the rest of the movie, there's absolutely not a word being said until like one scene later. And it's a silent film about a bedsheet and about haunting, and yet it destroyed me in every single aspect. And part of that is the cinematography, but part of that is the score, because the score is beautiful in this movie. But I really did feel the emotional questions and the emotional messages and the life and death messages and questions that were being brought up in this movie. I felt every single one of them without a word being said. And that to me is one of the most powerful things that I've seen in this movie. And it says so much about time, about connections and connections lasting more than lifetimes, and about love and what is love and what is time in relation to love, and how trauma can determine where your life is going to go from one point to another. Whether it be Rooney Mara's character, who again I love Rooney Mara so much, and how she deals with trauma. There's obviously the famous scene in this movie, which is the pie eating scene, which is literally like a static shot on Rooney Mara, and it's not moving at all, and she's literally just eating a pie. And initially you want to say that's a very kind of weird kind of comedic thing, but it's 2 minutes in, you're like, oh no, this is just a very real moment of her just realizing that she just lost her husband, and this is her way of expressing her emotion without saying anything. And you see it as she starts to break down slowly, minute by minute, as she eats that pie. And it's so powerful, man. It destroyed me in every single level. And I felt like this was one of the most beautiful movies I've seen this year. It's one of the most thought-provoking movies without asking a single question. And that just, to me, is just why it's my number 2 movie of the year.
Right.
I love this movie.
Right. No, I mean, it's definitely a work of art. It's definitely a achievement by David Lowery to get this movie made. I mean, A24 has been doing nothing but putting out quality work. I believe Lady Bird's A24 too, right? So
is Disaster Artist. So is a ton of other movies.
Yeah. I mean, this year they've been putting Good Time. Yeah, which is, I should have mentioned that. I don't know who mentioned, but I didn't. But yes, that is they've been doing nothing but amazing work, and I'm glad.
And this movie isn't for everyone too.
It isn't. I
know you saw it.
I just saw it like right before I got here. it's not for me. I could get what they're going for. You know what I mean? I got what. And you're right. It is essentially a silent film. It's all through the visual language and through the words and through the acting that you get the emotion behind all that's happening. It's not my kind of movie just because like there's not really much that happens like plot wise, and it's more about the internal conflict than there is anything else. And I thought it reflected that really well. So I mean, this is I'm happy for Rooney Mara and Casey Affleck doing. I guess this was his follow up to his Oscar win.
Yep.
So yeah.
There you go.
The Ghost Story.
Go watch A Ghost Story, guys. I'm telling you, it's an amazing movie. Even though RB3 didn't like it, I loved it. I thought it was amazing.
I didn't.
It's definitely not for everyone. I completely understand if you guys are gonna be like, "What was that?" Because it's definitely not for everyone.
Yeah, no. I mean, I like it. It's not for me. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
I feel you.
it's cool though. I mean, I definitely think people should watch it.
Yeah.
I think especially if you're like a young filmmaker.
Yeah.
It's like I've been having a hard time because I'm in film school and we have to make shorts that some don't have dialogue, some do. So I have a hard time kind of figuring out what's a movie like a present movie that that shows you how to communicate without words and without just with the visuals. And this movie definitely does that. So I think film students should watch it. I think everybody should watch it and at least try it. And I think that 5-minute, if at least watch the 5-minute pie eating scene. That's a great scene. That's one of the.
It's amazing scene.
Yeah, and that's Rooney Mara just killing it acting wise.
Yeah.
So, that I definitely recommend, and very not similar, but kind of Personal Shopper was in that same vein.
That's right.
The dead coming back to like not haunt, but to like have a presence, and someone's life. So. Yeah, it's interesting. There
you go, man.
Yeah.
It's my number 2 movie of the year, Ghost Story. Go watch it.
Yeah, so we're going to move on to my number 1.
Your number 1.
And this is the highly anticipated RB3's number 1.
Which you've told everyone on Twitter already.
Yeah, I probably have. And I probably said it on
you probably said it on the podcast.
Yeah, but hey, it is what it is. If you don't know what my number 1 is, here it is, ladies and gentlemen. It's Mr. Christopher Nolan's Dunkirk. That to me is the movie of the year of 2017. This is a film that I've gone on about it plenty of times before, and even on our last podcast. But it's Nolan's return to form. Is him making we talked about the last with A Ghost Story being essentially a silent film. In many ways, Dunkirk is a not silent film, but it's very it's not a lot of dialogue, but very, very heavy sound effects and very heavy music. And I think that's all playing into some of the brilliance of it. I mean, the sound effects are so loud and the music is so blasting that there are points where you can't even distinguish the two from each other. And I just think like overall from the direction, from the cast, and we didn't even touch on people like homie who directed Thor,
Kenneth Branagh.
Kenneth Branagh in this movie has like a quietly great part. Mark Rylance is fantastic. Tom Hardy is
great.
Yeah, he's doing that thing with the planes. I mean, honestly, like the aerial sequences alone just go to show like how incredibly intense this movie is. I mean, a lot of war movies are about the war or the social commentary about the war, or they're about especially when you're talking about movies like the Thin Red Line and Apocalypse Now. And there's some movies that are about the characters of war, right? Like Saving Private Ryan or Fury, which was David Ayer's last thing before Suicide Squad and before Bright. But those are movies about the characters, and there's movies about the war. But this movie is really about survival. This movie's all a survival tale, hoping that you could get these characters off the beach like as soon as possible. And I remember when they announced the runtime for this movie, like an hour 30 or something like that. Like an hour 40, something like that. But when like a lot of people were like, what? Like Nolan's known for doing the 3 hour, 2 hour, 45-minute movies. So what is he going for here? Is this going to be rushed? Is it not what he wants? But no, it's exactly what you need. Cause I mean, you can't be on the edge of your seat for 3 hours. It's not going to work. Eventually you're going to get tired, but this movie is like the perfect pace to me. It moves efficiently, swiftly. It's just mind blowing. The way each of the action set pieces are handled, in the sense that you're getting a feel for the tension and the suspense, but you're also getting like real genuine human moments, like the scene where going back to the Tom Hardy when he is flying when he's in that dogfight with the thing, and he's like navigate right and to like aim his target right inside the perfect position, and like after that there's like this little glimmer of light in his eyes, like it's very subtle, but it's like so nice how they just how Nolan just slips that little moment in. And then like how that other scene where the plane crashes into the water, and he and you see it from his perspective, it's like cool, he got out alive, like perfect. And then when you go back to that scene later, it's like no, this dude was like struggling to survive, and like he can get like that to me is the sign of like true cinematic filmmaking, when obviously the whole idea of film is that you're manipulating the audience, and you're having people
feel a certain way.
Yeah, feel a certain way, and you're using like editing to make them feel that certain type of way. I mean, this movie is like, oh no, we're gonna show you both sides of the coin and how that affects people. So it's amazing to me, man. This is my movie of the year.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those movies that I saw it, and I there's not a Nolan movie I think that I don't like. Nolan to me is just make a great movie every single time, and this is definitely one of those movies because it's a great freaking movie. I would definitely put it in my honorable mentions. It's a movie that I feel like it deserves all the credit that it's being getting, because of how amazing Nolan is as a director itself. And yeah, you're right. The aerial stuff for me is the stuff that works the most. I mean, visually too. Visually, it's amazing. Just like being up in the air in that kind of fighter plane is just spectacular. And obviously, like you said before, seeing the time jumps in this movie and seeing perspectives jump in this movie is very interesting. Because I love seeing his buddy on the boat kind of cheering him on.
Right.
The guy who got out of the plane.
Yeah.
And he's like, come on, dude, come on. Like that to me is like so real, because it's like, you were just up in the air and now you're on the boat, and it's like your perspective changes now all of a sudden. And I thought that was really, really cool. And now I'm going to jump to my number one movie of the year, and it's obvious. It's crazy because you know what's funny, man? After seeing this movie, I tweeted out and I said, I literally quote, I said, I think I have to call it early in the year. I saw my favorite movie of the year, and I'm calling it early, guys. My favorite movie of the year is Get Out. Get Out is my favorite movie of the year, and I said that when I walked out of the movie. I knew it was my favorite. I was like, it is one of the best cinematic experiences that I've had in years. It probably ever. Like it really is maybe The Dark Knight was the other one that I've had an experience like that, where you don't believe what you're seeing, and everyone in the theater is with you on this journey, and everyone in the theater is feeling the exact same way you are. Yeah. And you feel like your inner emotions are suddenly coming out in fruition. Cause like by the end of this movie, dude, by the end of Chris trying to get out, you're screaming. Yeah. You're legitimately like out loud. People in my theater were like, yeah, get out, and I was just like, someone did that. Like I've been wanting to do that for the past 30 minutes, but someone did it out loud in a theater, and then I started to cheer in the theater. And it's one of those movies that, in the beginning of the movie, I kind of felt like I knew where it was headed, and then by the end of the movie, I was like, man, if this guy doesn't survive, I'm gonna be so pissed. Like I was just like, I rooted so hard for the character of Chris, and that's all credit to Jordan Peele, and that's all credit to Daniel Kaluuya, who gives an amazing performance in this movie. And he's finally getting some attention, like some Oscar, award attention, for his performance, because his performance in this movie is so freaking good. And I know him from Black Mirror, because I remember that episode season 2, episode 2, 15 Million Merits, which is my favorite episode of Black Mirror. And I remember seeing that episode and not knowing who he is and just being like, man, that guy's a really good actor. And then when they announced Jordan Peele is doing a social horror movie and starring this guy named Daniel Kaluuya from Black Mirror, I was like, oh crap, that's Bing from Black Mirror. He's so good in that episode that I knew right away I knew the movie was going to be great just based on the lead. And what it ended up being was a movie that is going to last a long time. Yeah. And a movie that I walked out of thinking, man, the way Jordan Peele directed tension, the way he directed emotion, the way he directed rooting for a character. You get his backstory. You get an emotional connection to Chris. You get an intelligent character, not a dumb guy who's making stupid decisions in a horror movie that you're just kind of like, dude, just die already. You've had that so many times in horror movies, and finally you get a character who's making all the right decisions, and he's still struggling to survive, and all you freaking want is for him to make it out. That's it. And that to me is just spectacular on so many different levels, so well handled. The twist is well handled. The investment that you get inside this movie is just so freaking good that it just shows you that Jordan Peele is a talent, and a talent that is going to probably last a very long time in Hollywood industry.
Oh yeah.
And it's crazy how much he delivered in this one movie that gave you so many different feelings, whether it be laughing, whether it be screaming, whether it be crying, whether it be every single sense of an emotional feeling that you can feel inside of a movie you felt in this movie.
Right.
And you got that from a horror movie.
Yeah.
That to me is just crazy, and that's why Get Out is my number one movie of this year, guys.
Right. So kind of recapping the list, man.
Yeah. You want to count down 10 through 1 and I'll count down my 10 through 1?
Yeah, my 10 through 1. My number 10, The Post. Number 9, The Meyerowitz Story. Number 8, The Shape of Water. Number 7, Coco. Number 6, Logan. Number 5, Phantom Thread. Number 4, Okja. Number 3, Get Out. Number 2, Lady Bird. And number 1, Dunkirk.
My top 10 is going to be number 10 is It. Number 9 is Logan. Number 8 is Blade Runner 2049. Number 7 is Wind River. Number 6 is Coco. Number 5 is Lady Bird. Number 4 is Thor Ragnarok. That's right, I said Thor Ragnarok. Number 3 is Your Name. Go watch Your Name. It's a cool Japanese anime movie. And number 2, A Ghost Story. Amazing movie. And number 1 is Get Out.
Whoa. Yeah, we both have pretty good lists, man.
I think they're great lists, man.
Yeah,
I think we have enough variety inside the list to not be like everyone else,
right?
But still, like observe the good movies that deserve attention.
Right. Imagine if Call Me by Your Name and Your Name were on
yeah, the 2 Your Name movies.
Yeah, right. No, yeah. I mean, I think in looking at the list, I mean, even at the honorable mentions too. There's a little more diversity, not just in front of the camera, but behind the camera too. I mean, both have a Guillermo del Toro. We both have, I have a Guillermo del Toro. Yeah. But we both have Coco, which is directed by Lee Unkrich, but it's also co-directed by a Mexican director. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but and of course Get Out is on both of our lists. Lady Bird's on both of our lists. So we're there's representation. Not that we're picking directors because of representation, but it just goes to show there's some changing tides in Hollywood that I think.
It goes to show that when you listen to a younger, diverse perspective, aka Ace and RB3. A Latino guy and a black guy, you might get a different perspective, and maybe that's why you want to check out more episodes of the Meaning of Podcast.
Hey, there you go. That's the plug, baby. That's the plug.
All right, guys. Make sure you guys let us know what is your top 10 list. We'll be reading them because we do care and we do want to read them. Let us know what you thought of our list. What was your favorite of our list? What was a surprise in our list? And what movie did you not hear about before that you now want to check out based on our list?
Let me say this too. Top 10 is putting out their list today too, y'all. So spam our comments and then go to their comments and tell them that the Meaning of Podcast had the better list. The Meaning of Podcast had the better list. Comment that in the top 10 comments. Let's get that going.
Let's get that going, man. All right, I'm Ace.
This is RB3.
We are peacing out, guys. Have a good one.